Hello again and welcome to dentReviews. Tonight I want to do a review of the 7th Acoustics Supernova. It's kind of an interesting IEM. I saw a graph of this thing a long time ago and thought it looked really intriguing and wanted to give it a try because even though it's not perfectly matching my treble on my dentReviews target, it's got a very linear and very smooth response that I thought must sound great. So, not too long ago, I had a blind shootout that I did with Mark over at Super Review, and he sent me a bunch of things that I compared and contrasted, trying to find the driver configuration, all this stuff while I was blindfolded. Well, this was in that set, and I didn't know it, and ironically, I wasn't really impressed by it. And after I found out, I was kind of shocked. I thought I would like it more than I did based on just the graph alone. So, we'll get into that in a minute, but first, let's take a look at this thing. So this is the 7th Acoustics Supernova. It's got a sort of standard plastic feeling shell, resin plastic, whatever. It's pretty thick, pretty big. I do feel like the shape of it is slim enough that even though it's thick in terms of depth, it's very comfortable in my ear. It's very lightweight, so I have zero issues in comfort wearing it. It's got a cool faceplate. It says 7A for 7th Acoustics in gold there, and or silver. I can't really tell in the light here. Silver, I think. And then the faceplate is like an opal style with kind of a blue, purple, green color shifting as you move it in the light. It's kind of pretty. I actually like it. It's nice. You got some nozzles there for the sound ports, two of which look like they have Knowles filters or something like that in there. I don't really know. I can't tell, but I'm not sure if the other ones are bass ports or what that is. But it's got a standard 0.78 millimeter 2-pin connector, common on the Moondrop and 7Hz and all those other brands. Pretty standard cable. So yeah, it's a nice looking IM. It's 6 balanced armatures, and it comes in at $800 roughly. So that is quite pricey. So given that, how does it sound? Well, I'm really torn on this IM because I'll be honest, as I said, in the blind shootout, I wasn't really impressed with it. And I'll sum up this entire review with this one statement. It doesn't move me emotionally. And that's a weird thing to say, but as linear and smooth and good as the response is, I just don't have an emotional connection with this IM. There's a lot of music I listen to with other IMs, and they move me emotionally. Like, I get drawn into the song, and I just feel a great elation of joy listening to the song, and this doesn't do that for me. It's not that they're bad. In fact, they're actually very, very good. They're probably the best IM I've ever heard that I don't really get anything from. So let's start with the frequency response. So first of all, they're all balanced armature, which I do think that the bass on these is phenomenal given that they're balanced armature. I do think a dynamic driver could add a little bit of tactility and maybe sub-bass rumble and like impact, but given that they're balanced armature, the shape of the bass is phenomenal. It's got an upward rising curve. There's not a lot of mid-bass boost, and the quantity is very good. So excellent job with the bass. Mids, spot on. Perfect linearity, smooth. Treble's where I have my issue. The treble has a lot of extension, goes up way high, kind of a little bit of an odd shape in the kind of mid-upper treble, but the overall treble is free of any dips or peaks and nothing objectionable, and the treble extension is superb. So they have a very clear, precise, dry, airy kind of quality to them. Where I find the biggest problem, though, is the lower treble, from 1 to 4 kilohertz roughly. In that region, they're a little bit reduced or recessed, and for me personally, I think that that lower region is critical for that emotional response I talked about. In fact, if you look at something like the Etymotic ER4S, which has been one of my favorite emotional response IMs of all time, I just love the experience that I've had in a lot of instances with that IM, it has a lot of lower treble prominence, and that's an Etymotic target that I love. I agree with that shape that Etymotic target has. And that didn't have a lot of bass, and it didn't even have the utmost treble extension necessarily in terms of air, but that just really captivates me emotionally. These have such a nice linear balance. Bass, mids, and treble are very, very neutral relative to each other, but that lower treble reduction really draws away the substance from a lot of instruments that would make me normally have an emotional response. So for instance, if I listen to a song, I said this in the other reviews that I just did, David Gates, Never Let Her Go, it's one of my favorite songs. The guitars in that song they have a lot of the body of the guitar, the particular guitar sound, like the electric guitar, has a smooth kind of reverberant quality in the lower treble. So on these, that's a little bit more recessed, and it gives the guitars a more clear, crisp sound, but they lack that, mid-body quality to them, that smooth, reverberant quality. Same with the vocal, same with the strings. And then when it adds up to the entire song, while it's not a drastic change from something like the Orchestra Light that I compare it to, it's enough that it just doesn't really grab me emotionally, especially in songs like Gareth Coker, Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps. The last track on that song, which I mentioned in the Orchestra Light video, that song is just replete with lush, beautiful strings. And when the piano, oboe, and chimes are playing in that kind of minimal, spacious recording, these sound superb, and they're very clear, very well delineated. Imaging is nice. It just sounds really high quality. But when those lush strings fade in, they sound great. They sound clinically correct. They sound high quality, but I'm not emotionally affected by them like I am with something like the Orchestra Light. And I don't want to give the wrong impression. I'm not saying these are the most dead boring IEM ever. No, they're very good. They're very good response. They have a very good high quality sound to them. And I think if I wasn't comparing anything else, I'm sure they would give me emotional responses to certain music. But just overall, having listened to these other IEMs, these come across almost boring to me. And it's funny because I've heard that in the past with people who don't like neutral IEMs in general. They call those boring. I could see why someone might love these, but to me, I just find them boring. Like, they don't engage me. They don't elicit an emotional response. So as good as they sound, they just aren't for me. Now, going back to the frequency response, I think that EQ could possibly solve that a little bit, but I'm not really a fan of EQ in terms of needing it everywhere I use my headphones. And I don't think it's necessary for these, especially if you're the kind of person that enjoys listening to these. And by all means, they're a phenomenal response as is. Smooth, linear, clear, free of dips and peaks. Great. But the overall tonality lends itself to a dryness. I don't mean this in a rough way, like not a negative way, but they have like a sandpaper quality where you can hear every little treble nuance, but in a very dry, flat kind of way. Compared to the Orchestra Light, which is very spacious and deep and wide, like you're in this cloud of sound, these are a little bit more like the sound is in front of you. There is depth and width, but it's more in front of you and kind of clear and dry. Etymotic, I would say, comes off as a wall of sound. Some people describe it as like a wall in front of you. These are like that a little bit more, but kind of halfway between Etymotic and Kiwi Ear's Orchestra Light. So I think they have a very clinical, precise, all the instruments are very highly delineated, and it sounds like when you have a guitar and a vocal and a string, you can hear the dead space between those instruments that give them a nice, well-delineated clarity that I like. But again, at the cost of sounding a little bit dry, and it almost takes away a little of the reverb, a little bit of the reverb that you get in a recording. It's like it subtracts a little bit of that reverb. Things that normally would sound deep and echoey and reverberant come across sounding less so. Whereas on the Orchestra Light, it kind of represents that liquid, reverberant quality a little bit more accurately, in my opinion. These sound a little bit more upfront in the treble and clear, whereas the Orchestra Light sound a little bit more laid back and liquidy. So it's definitely a subjective taste thing. I'd argue they're probably similarly deviated from my target in that these have a closer bass response and maybe a smoother treble response, but the Orchestra Light has maybe a little bit more lower treble, and the areas where I think it matters more, it fills in, so I kind of prefer that over these. It's a hard thing for me to say because I really do think that they sound incredibly high quality. They're very studio monitor-like, and they have a very high competence in terms of technicalities. I think they sound excellent, but they just don't engage me, and I have to be honest, I listen to them, I'm just not drawn in emotionally. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy listening to music on them. I do. I think they sound great, but I think when I take something like the Orchestra Light and listen to that, it elicits more of an emotional response of enjoyment and, this is nice. And I get that more from something like that. So $800 for me is a little bit of a hard sell. I would much rather spend another $200 and get the Monarch MK2. That's just my personal opinion. If this fits your desired taste, I think they're a high quality sound that really excels, so maybe that's worth it for you. If you get them used, even better. But with the Orchestra Lite coming in at $259, that would be an easy win for me. I just think that the more engaging sound that elicits more of a response for me, and the cheaper price is just a win-win. So that's the 7th Acoustics Supernova. I don't mean to criticize. I hope this doesn't sound like a criticism. It's a phenomenal set. It's just not personally my taste. It just doesn't do it for me enough because of that lower treble predominantly. So if you have any questions about it, let me know. Please like and subscribe, and check out the other videos I mentioned on the other IEMs in that blind shootout. And as always, I thank you guys for watching.